All right, folks, welcome back. It is a pleasure to have you with me today, and it is an ultimate pleasure to have Dr. Peter McCullough with us today to talk about these issues. Dr. McCullough, it's always good to see you, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so one of the things you said, I'm going to play that clip in a little bit. You said these vaccines need to be taken off the market immediately. I think your quote was, if things aren't safe, you take them off the market. What is happening here?
Grant, over the decades in the United States, we've developed a culture of safety. Everybody knows this. Every household appliance has a UL, Underwriter's Laboratory, seal on it to make sure that your toaster's not going to blow up. Remember Ralph Nader and all his work on consumer product safety. What about all the recalls that we have on our cars and trucks? Because the auto industry, they know they have to be safe. The airbags need to work. The brakes need to work. The same thing is true with drugs. The US FDA has pulled hundreds and hundreds of drugs off the market because they're not safe. The US FDA has done inspection. But when it comes with the COVID-19 vaccines, no inspections, no safety analyses, and despite thousands of peer-reviewed papers showing they're not safe for human use, they're not pulled off the market, Grant. Trump, Robert F. Kennedy, and Marty Makary, the FDA commissioner, they all have the power and authority to pull these off the market. What they would do is they would tell Pfizer, Moderna, and Novavax, pull them off the market, and the companies voluntarily recall. The companies are not showing any signs of voluntary recall. And all three of those positions, now that they're in office, they won't even take questions on COVID-19 vaccine safety.
All right. When we talk about the numbers of deaths, of complications, here, let me play a clip. We'll do this. I'm going to play a clip by a gentleman by the name of Steve Kirsch. This is what... Oh, is it not here? I don't have it. Let me play this clip. This is from a doctor in Australia. Hold on. Play this.
We certainly know it can last at least 2 years and probably 4 years from some studies that have been done. And I'm seeing patients who have, it's a new phenomenon for us. Most of my patients now are vaccine damaged. It's totally changed the pattern of my own practice. And they say, how long am I going to have this problem? And I say, I don't know. I can help you control this, and we can do this quite effectively. But I don't know how long. Sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes a year, sometimes 2 years, and sometimes a lot longer.
Which is a remarkable fact. I mean, I remember the early days when we were told, well, okay, this is a new technology, but mRNA doesn't last very long in the body.
All right, so what he's saying there seems to be very troubling to me. Are the numbers supporting all of these claims, from the deaths, the injuries, what he's talking about? Are the numbers there to back you up?
Grant, they are. That's Dr. Robert Clancy from Australia. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize. I mean, he knows what he's talking about. He's talking to Brett Weinstein, probably one of the best podcasters, a natural biologist. This is the real deal. We are now using a reference lab in Germany, Grant, that is finding Pfizer, Moderna messenger RNA and SV40 DNA fragments and spike protein now in people who took the shots in 2021. They're finding it inside blood cells, inside the blood in 2025. These vaccines are not getting out of the body.
All right, I'm going to ask a question I ask a lot of doctors. I may have asked it to you before. How do we determine that it's the vaccine that's causing these problems as opposed to it's the COVID virus itself that's causing these problems?
Advanced laboratories can tell, Grant. Now, when you get the virus, this is the spike protein. Let me bring it into view. You get the little tip of the spike protein in your body, but not the whole spike protein, because the segment near the virus is sacrificed at the ACE2 receptor. When you get the vaccine, you get the whole spike protein, the whole length. And this can be detected by laboratory testing. Indirectly, we test it with antibodies. So here in Dallas in my clinic, we measure antibodies. So if someone's had the natural infection, Grant, like you and me, we're probably 1,000. I had seen a lot of patients. I was 2,300. If you take the vaccine on the antibody scale, you can be 5, 10, 15, over 25,000 units per ml. Recently, Dr. Mary Telly Bowden from Houston was on Joe Rogan. She says her vaccinated patients have 10 times the inferred spike protein than those who just had the infection.
Wow. All right. Well, I guess in many respects, that's a good opportunity to tell you that the wellness company has this spike detox at twc.health/grant. It seems to help a lot, Doc, doesn't it?
Yeah, I have thousands of patients under direct observation. We have the peer-reviewed publications. The spike protein and everything we draw conclusions about it goes down with detoxification. We're talking about McCullough protocol, base spike protein detoxification. The lead product is by the wellness company, the ultimate spike detox. 2 capsules twice a day on an empty stomach under doctor's direction can be advanced to 4 capsules twice a day. It's mainstream. Wellness company, Frontline Critical Care Consortium, which is now Independent Medical Association, experts all over, they are all using McCullough protocol, base spike detoxification, wellness company, ultimate spike detox. We're all agreed people need to be on this, Grant, at least a year, and if well tolerated, continue indefinitely.
All right, that's twc.health/grant. Use that promo code GRANT for 10% off of that. All right, Doc, I wanted to ask you about this tweet that I read off the top of the show, because this to me is very troubling. I saw it on your Twitter feed, X feed, whatever we want to call it, and it's troubling. Let me put it up here again for everyone to see. Now, this is from Aaron Siri, who's been really instrumental in covering a lot about what's been going on and the cover-up surrounding the COVID vaccines. He's revealing the CDC has dismantled the Vaccine Safety Data Link, a critical database holding vaccine safety data from over 21 million Americans. The data has reportedly been handed back to HMOs and other sources, making it nearly impossible for HHS to investigate the causes of autism or to conduct a comprehensive vaccinated versus unvaccinated study. Now, I tried to go and find more research about this. It appears what I can confirm beyond a shadow of a doubt is that there are portions of data that has disappeared from the CDC website. No one can argue that. This vaccine safety data link, it's up in the air whether it's really fully gone, not fully gone. What has your research found on this? Either way, the fact that we're asking questions on this really tells the whole story that something funky's going on here.
Grant, I had a personal conversation with Aaron Siri, who made that tweet. He's a vaccine litigation expert. And, Kaiser Permanente, all the big HMOs had a big government program where they sent information to the CDC about childhood vaccines, autism, and other problems. So the answer is probably in this large data set, 21 million children who are enrolled in this HMO. The CDC has it, and now it looks like they are trying to cover up this connection. They're not going to let the data be examined. Robert F. Kennedy has promised radical transparency. He's promised Trump he's going to have an answer on autism by September. Now there's a big setback, probably by those within the CDC who are trying to undermine the acting director, who is Suzanne Monterez, and undermine Robert F. Kennedy Jr., HHS Secretary.
Do you think it's because they don't want the connection of autism known? Is that it? Is that there's a connection between this vaccine and quite possibly, I'm going to show a chart here in a second, other vaccines as well?
Grant, it has to do with the whole nature of raising the question. What people at the CDC are terrified of, and in fact, Senator Bill Cassidy and Megha Hassan, Bernie Sanders, they're terrified of investigation because investigation will raise questions and lead to vaccine hesitancy. People will become hesitant to say, I don't know if I want my kids to take the shots. Vaccine hesitancy is held up as being bad, vaccine acceptance good. Therefore, any investigation is bad. And so therefore, it's going to be squelched. what Kennedy is saying is, listen, we have to be honest. We've got a autism epidemic. 3.2% of children in the United States have autism. Heavily vaccinated California, Grant, is 5% of children with autism. And among kids with autism, 27% have profound autism, meaning they IQ less than 55. They're wearing diapers. They can't use the bathroom, nonverbal, head banging. They have lifelong special care needs. What our CDC is saying is, this is a growing epidemic, and we should just prepare for it with more special needs programs. And many of us are saying, wait a minute, we've got to get to the bottom of autism. And so we need the vaccine safety data link restored. It's a public use file. Siri is right. Pam Bondi needs to step up and aid Robert F. Kennedy in this agenda for radical transparency.
I would argue here, Doctor, that when you mention Pam Bondi, to me, it certainly seems like there's potential for criminal activity here, that if this data is just wiped out, you have transparency issues at play. Now, I've seen some that says, oh, well, it wasn't the CDC's data in the first place. But the fact that they're wiping out data, the possibility of a cover-up, where is Pam Bondi on this?
Aaron Siri told me he's disappointed. In fact, she has not allowed some of his investigations and FOIAs for other data sets to go through. And, as I said, we've got Trump, Robert F. Kennedy, and even FDA Commissioner Marty Makary. They're not taking questions on the COVID shots publicly. No investigation of a couple hundred more COVID vaccine deaths in the vaccine adverse event reporting system. Grant, virtually no one's taking COVID shots. They should just be off the market, and then we can do an investigation. For childhood vaccines, many are calling for a complete overhaul of this expanding vaccine schedule. It's probably too much for the kids.
All right, let me show you a chart. This was done by a doctor in Oregon where he studied vaccinated children versus unvaccinated children. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, doctor, this was unvaccinated, all vaccines, right? That were the kids were unvaccinated. If you look, I know it's a little hard on the screen for many of you, but the vaccinated is the orange line. The unvaccinated is the blue. Here's what the data showed. Fever, 9 times higher in vaccinated kids. Ear pain, 3.4 times higher. Eye disorders, 1.8 times higher. Asthma, 5 times higher. This is in vaccinated kids versus unvaccinated kids. Going down the list, anemia, 5.5 times higher. Eczema, 4.5 times higher. And here's the real interesting one. ADHD, Doc. 0 cases of ADHD in the unvaccinated children. That, to me, is amazing.
Grant, this first author on this, Dr. Paul Thomas, respected pediatrician, this is one of now a half a dozen studies. Healthy children born are healthier if they defer on all the childhood vaccines. At least during the early phase of immunologic, neurologic development, ages 0 to 5, if you can, get through that with no vaccines whatsoever, the children are healthier. A recent paper by Mawson and colleagues, Journal of Science, Public Health Policy, and the Law, 49,000 Medicaid children in Florida. No doubt about it, the kids who have no visits for vaccines, and in that study, it's now 10% of kids not taking Medicaid vaccine, baby visits, they're healthier.
You know me, I always like to play skeptic, right? So when I look at this data, I don't doubt the data. I don't think the data is false. But then I say, and I'm not a statistician or a doctor, so take that for what it's worth. But if all these vaccinated kids had the same vaccine, it could be a situation that it's just one of the vaccines in the group that's caused this. Maybe 2. I don't know. Maybe the problem is that it's all of the vaccines. But we don't know that from this study, right? Of which vaccine or how many, only that if you're vaccinated with all these, that you have these issues.
Grant, I tell you, I've looked at the data carefully. It looks like it's combinations, giving many vaccines on the same day. Let me give you an example. The first combination vaccine was the MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella. Well, the seminal publication by Andrew Wakefield, Lancet, 1998, looks like it was associated with autism. Well, guess what, Grant? The Japanese believe combination vaccines are so dangerous, they don't even have MMR on the market. They give measles, mumps, rubella separately. So what's different between Japan and the United States? I mean, this should tell you something. It's actually trying to pile on. If I prescribe 16 drugs at once, now kids at age 1 get 16 different vaccines at once. If I prescribe 16 drugs at once, for sure you're going to have a side effect. If I gave them one by one, chances are you'd be fine.
Interesting. You mentioned Japan. I think they were the most vaccinated by percentage, correct, for the COVID vaccine. This was all-cause mortality, basically mean total deaths. And you look, starting in 2021, well, what happened there? Oh, I wonder. It's after COVID burst on the scene. All-cause mortality, 450,000 excess deaths, an increase going all the way through till 2024. The COVID vax is the only thing, and they were the most vaccinated of any country. That can't be a coincidence.
Grant, it can't. There's 12 studies like this now. Those who took the COVID-19 vaccine do face an all-cause mortality that's higher than the unvaccinated. So there's a price to pay. The whole part of this discussion, Grant, is there's a price to pay. So look at the childhood vaccines. For sure, the measles vaccine reduces the risk of measles. For sure, chickenpox reduces chickenpox. But there's a side effect. There's a consequence. And one of the problems with the childhood vaccines, it looks like allergic diseases, neuropsychiatric diseases. I mean, these are serious trade-offs. I think I'd rather, kind of get my kid through measles than have a child seriously damaged with autism their whole life.
Yeah. This leads me to a soundbite I saw. It's you, Dr. McCullough, at a church in California, basically saying what you were saying. But I want to play it because you make a great point here. So let me roll this.
17 organizations, hundreds of lawmakers are calling for the COVID vaccines to be removed from the market. Not safe for human use. We've compiled it in this manuscript. Next slide. Here are some of the organizations. The vaccines are not safe for human use. Ron Johnson in the Senate is right. He's made this call. Marjorie Taylor Greene in the House is right. She has made the call. I made the call early, very early, on record in the Texas Senate in March of 2021. Not safe. When we say something's not safe, that means it's gone. We're not going to pontificate about it. It's not going to be a political argument. It's not going to be gone.
Doc, why are there so many other doctors arguing with you about this?
Grant, if this was 1950 and I said cigarette smoking should stop, the entire medical community would be against me. The doctors were smoking. The nurses were smoking. The doctors were advertising it. They said the smoking was safe. It's the same thing. The medical community is on the wrong side of this argument. Yeah. It was smoking. It took them like 20 years before they started saying, oh, yeah, smoking's bad. It's probably going to be 20 years before the doctors say, oh, my gosh, these COVID vaccines were bad. It's the same thing. That's the reason why. Once somebody takes a COVID shot, Grant, they don't want to hear anything else. My average colleague says, listen, I don't want to talk about it. So
should I be really disappointed in RFK Jr. right now?
Well, this is what I think, Grant. He was a vocal critic of vaccines and COVID-19 vaccines before he came into office. Now he hasn't said boo on the COVID vaccines. They did restrict the recommendations, so they're not recommended for children or pregnant women anymore. But still, the current FDA recommendations says that a third of Americans should be taking COVID shots. Still, Grant, it's way less than 15%. None of us are going to take these shots. So the FDA and RFK, they're in a sense not in touch with reality. This is my observation. Not a single country in the world has initiated a safety review of the COVID vaccines, and not a single country has pulled them off the market. I think Trump and RFK and Macri, they act like they're taking orders from somebody.
Is it
And the
big
orders
pharma?
are, well, listen, in my book, I outline a bio-pharmaceutical complex, a pretty powerful, cartel of, non-governmental organizations, regulatory agencies, pharmaceuticals. We know Trump is friends with Bill Gates. Trump loves to be friends with people who are wealthier than him and more powerful than him. And you know what? It looks like Trump and our government apparatus is taking orders from somebody, just like the French and everybody else are.
I can't believe that Trump would be taking orders from anybody. If anything, for President Trump, he may have a sensitivity because he was so big on Operation Warp Speed. He's backed off of that a little bit. He doesn't talk about it as much as he used to. There may be some embarrassment factor there. And I think President Trump isn't focused on this. I don't think it's his issue right now, and I don't think it's his big important issue. Maybe it should be. I think this is Health and Human Services that's overrun by the deep state. There's probably orders coming out of the White House, maybe not directly from Trump, telling RFK Jr. and crew to just pipe down about it all because they don't want the headaches from it. But at some point, somebody's got to do something, because I truly do believe, Doc, as you do, I know, that this is killing people. It's not just adverse effects. It's literally death. And if we don't do something about it, that we all are culpable.
Grant, I agree. And, it's so interesting. Trump wants to be very different than Biden, except on the vaccines. The word is that Anthony Fauci approached Biden in his final days, and Fauci asked for a 10-year pardon.
Mm-hmm.
Trump has never, gone after Fauci. Now, he's thrown lots of people under the bus. I don't believe Trump is gullible. I don't think he was seduced or deceived by Fauci. And I do believe Trump wants to be different than Biden. Yeah. But he can't separate himself from Biden when it comes to the vaccines. They're connected at the hip. Well, it's so interesting.
Before we even came on air, you and I were talking, and the Epstein files, we've been disappointed on. There's a whole slew of things that we're disappointed on. I actually have come to the conclusion, I'm not even sure the Epstein files even exist anymore. I think they may have been destroyed a long time ago, and we're never going to see those things. So this gets to me just how ingrained the deep state really is. And I know it used to sound like this, controversial or conspiracy term, the deep state, but I don't know how else to explain it. I think it is very, very, very real, Doc.
It is. Well, listen, if people were freely thinking about this, Trump, RFK, and Macri would take questions from an open mic. The fact that they refuse questions, Grant, makes me believe that they've been told to walk some type of line. All of them have.
Well, especially RFK. I'm not sure President Trump's prepared to take questions on this. I really don't. I have certain political issues that are my issue and certain politicals that aren't, and I kind of stay away from the ones that I'm just not interested in. I think that this may fall into that realm on Trump. But RFK Jr., he most certainly is one of the most well-informed men when it comes to this issue, and him not taking questions just seems bizarre to me. And so I appreciate you putting pressure on these leaders, because they need pressure from people like us. They're going to get pressure from Democrats on certain things, but when it starts to get pressure from their own crew, that's when maybe we start to see some change.
No, I agree. And remember, even if there's a small number of people who are worried about safety and a larger number of people who aren't, we always side on the side of safety. Remember the Ford Pinto and Mercury Bobcat. There's a small number of people kind of concerned about the gas tanks. They're pulled off the market. People concerned about safety are always in the minority, Grant, but they trump the majority, which many times they're asleep at the wheel.
Yeah, it's very sad. Well, I appreciate you and the Wellness Company being on this front for sure. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you, have you on the program. Your insight's so valuable to so many people that we finally get the straight scoop from you and so many of the other Wellness Company doctors. There are other doctors out there who are speaking the truth too, but we most certainly appreciate your support of this program, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you.